بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. سعادة الدكتورة الشيخة رنا بنت عيسى بن دعيج آل خليفة، الأمين العام لمجلس التعليم العالي، أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، الضيوف الكرام، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته، وأهلا وسهلا بجميع الضيوف والمشاركين في مؤتمر البحرين الدولي الافتراضي الأول للذكاء الاصطناعي في التعليم العالي، والذي تنظمه المجموعة العالمية للذكاء الاصطناعي بالتعاون مع مركز ناصر للبحوث والتطوير. نحن نقف اليوم لنقدم أولاً كل الشكر والامتنان لمجلس التعليم العالي لدعمهم وجهودهم الحثيثة وسعيهم المستمر لإدراج الذكاء الاصطناعي ضمن المناهج الجامعية. ولا يفوتنا أيضاً أن نثمن دور المجلس البارز في إنجاح مساعي المملكة في مجال التعليم عن طريق تطوير سياسات التعليم العالي بشكل عام والبحث العلمي بشكل خاص، وتشجيع الباحثين على الاهتمام بالبحث والابتكار لتحقيق أهداف التنمية المستدامة. فقد أصبح أمراً أساسياً للجامعات تطوير وتأهيل الإطارات والسياسات اللازمة لمواكبة التغيير التكنولوجي عن طريق التركيز على تطوير مناهج التعليم العالي وتزويد أنظمة الجامعات الإدارية والأكاديمية بما يواجه المستجدات العصرية. سعادة الدكتورة الشيخة رنا بنت عيسى بن دعيج آل خليفة، نيابة عن المجموعة العالمية للذكاء الاصطناعي، نتقدم بخالص التهاني بمناسبة حصول سعادتكم على وسام الأمير سلمان بن حمد للاستحقاق الطبي، متمنين لسعادتكم بدوام التوفيق والسداد. السادة الأفاضل، يسعدنا ويشرفنا أن نستهل أولى محطات المؤتمر ونتشرف بدعوة سعادة الدكتورة الشيخة رنا بنت عيسى بن دعيج آل خليفة، الأمين العام لمجلس التعليم العالي، لإلقاء كلمتها، فلتتفضل سعادتها مشكورة.
شكراً دلال، وشكراً على التهنئة، ما قصرتي. Excellencies, distinguished professors, ladies and gentlemen. At the beginning, I am pleased to convey my heartfelt gratitude to the executive management and staff over at His Highness Sheikh Nasser Center for Research and Development in Artificial Intelligence and the International Group of Artificial Intelligence, especially Dr. Jassim Haji, for organizing this event and allowing me the opportunity to patronize it. As you are all aware, we are here today to inaugurate the launch of the first conference in the Middle East on artificial intelligence in higher education. So, what is artificial intelligence? In any discussion surrounding artificial intelligence, this is always the first question. The subject is highly debated, and I won't go into the deep technical issue here. So when people think about AI, what often comes in mind is Skynet from the Terminator movie. But today, we are far from machines that have the ability to perform the myriad of tasks. Even babies shift between the E's to allow how far is a matter of considerable debate. So today's artificial intelligence is a task specific. Broadly speaking, artificial patterns in seas of data, correlations that would not be immediately initiative or comprehensible to humans, and then using those patterns to make decisions. But what utility does all this serve with regards to higher education, from answering basic campus questions to providing academic support? AI is helping streamline the way things are done in higher education. Fortunately or not, depending on one's point of view, we're at a point where humanoid robot teachers stand in the front of our classrooms. So the use of artificial intelligence in education today is not embodied, as robustists call it. It may, though, have physical components, like the so-called Internet of Things, and visual or audio sensors that can collect sensory data. Primarily, however, education artificial intelligence is housed in two-dimensional software processing systems, from chatbots to discussion platforms. AI is popping up at campuses all over the globe. In fact, a recent AI in education market research report from Research and Market predicts that the global AI in education market will reach around 25.7 billion in 2030, up from just 1.1 billion in 2019. This same report shows that the largest demand for AI, in fact, has been for learning platforms, mainly because of the increased performance for robot and online education courses. Even before the pandemic, the report further predicts that the next AI area to explode will be intelligent tutoring and lecturing system applications. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, respected audience, I would like to emphasize that AI in higher education more precisely serves three distinctive kinds of applications. Artificial intelligence in higher education is 1, institutional, 2, student supportive, and 3, instructional. First, AI's use is institutional because higher education institutions increasingly rely on algorithms for marketing to prospective students, estimating class size, planning curricula, and allocating resources such as financial aid and facilities. Second, AI in higher education also serves as an auxiliary role to student support systems. Universities utilize machine learning in students' guidance. Some applications help students automatically schedule their course load. Others recommend courses, majors, and career paths, as is traditionally done by the guidance counselors or by career services offices. So these tools make recommendations based on how students with similar data profiles performed in the past. Another prominent way that predictive analytics is being used is student support, is for early warning systems, analyzing a wide array of data, academic, non-academic, operational, to identify students who are at risk of failing or dropping out of having mental health issues. So this particular use shows some of the real advantages of artificial intelligence. So the big data can give educators a more holistic insight into students' status. Traditionally, an institution might use a couple of blunt factors, for example, GPA or attendance, to assess whether a student is at risk. Now, however, artificial intelligence software systems can use much more granular patterns of information and students' behavior for real-time, up-to-the-minute assessment of student risk. They can even include data on whether students visit the library or a gym and when they use university services. Last but not least, colleges and universities can apply artificial intelligence in instructions. This would involve creating systems that respond to individual users' pace and progress. Educational software assesses students' progress and recommends or automatically delivers specific parts of a course for students to review or additional resource to consult. So these are often called personalized learning platforms. Although this phase has been sucked into the hip machine with a minimal consensus about what personalized learning actually means, here I'm using the phrase to talk about the different ways that instructional platforms Typically, those used in a flipped or online or blended environment can automatically help users tailor different pathways or provide them with feedback according to the particular errors they make. So in conclusion, I would like to stress the promise of artificial intelligence applications lie partly in their efficiency and partly in their efficacy. AI systems can capture a much wider array of data at a more granularity that can humans, and these two systems can do so in real time. They can also analyze many students, whether those students are in a classroom or in a student body or in a pool of applicants. In addition, AI systems offer excellent observations and interferences very quickly at a minimal cost. So these efficiencies will lead, we hope, to increased efficiency, to more effective teaching, learning institutional decisions and guidance. So this is essentially the one promise of the advent of artificial intelligence in higher education, that it will show us things we can't assess or even envision, given the limitations of human cognition and the difficulty of dealing with many different variables and a wide array of students. I would also like to take this opportunity to once again renew my heartfelt gratitude and appreciation to all, and especially to those who have contributed to the organization of today's event. Thank you very much.
نشكر سعادة الدكتورة الشيخة رنا بنت عيسى آل خليفة على هذه الكلمة الراقية، مقدرين جهودها الكبيرة والجلية في سبيل تحقيق ما تصبو إليه الأجيال باعتبارهم الثروة الحقيقية للمملكة. رئيس المجموعة العالمية للذكاء الاصطناعي لإلقاء كلمته، فليتفضل مشكورا.
شكرا دلال. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. سعادة الدكتورة الشيخة رنا عيسى بنت آل خليفة، أصحاب المعالي السعادة، ضيوف الكرام والزملاء. I will just switch to English to make sure the wider audience understands it. I would like to begin with thanking Her Excellency Dr. Sheikh Rana bint Isa bin Al Khalifa, the General Secretary of the Higher Education Council and the Deputy Chairman of the Board of Trustees of the Higher Education Council, and thanking her for patronizing the event and also her inspiring words. And I have listened to many AI lectures and conferences, and without being flourished on that, but Her Excellency given us some new horizons and guidelines on the artificial intelligence in the areas that have not been probably explored widely in the Middle East. And this is being the first and hopefully not the last of the conferences in higher education, which will help us in Bahrain to also strengthen and cement our position as being the center of an excellence in artificial intelligence, not only in Bahrain, but in the region, with a wide variety of the innovators, entrepreneurs, and expertise in the artificial intelligence, especially those who graduate from our universities and have been proven to provide many innovations and final year projects in the universities that has been materialized. Of course, this conference, without going into the details and hijacking the subjects that our expertise have kindly agreed to come and participate in this conference, they will be speaking the conference itself on how artificial intelligence is becoming an integral part of the universities. And by that, we do not mean only taking syllabuses and lectures in the artificial intelligence by the students, but also the areas of the research and how the computer visioning, for instance, is used for gradings and auto corrections, how the syllabuses are autonomously provided by the artificial intelligence, how the speech recognitions are done for auditory interactivities, and how the data privacy synthesizing responses to students' questions, supporting students for study selections. How many students will find that at certain ages have difficulties or uncertainties which subjects to probably select for the rest of their careers, but AI nowadays with their background can help them and guide them to some of those. So the speakers who will also share with us their expertise or experiences, whether it's in the European Union or United States of America. So without further ado, I would like to give it back to our MC and the honorable moderator and speakers. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, دكتور. نشكر سعادة الدكتور جاسم حاجي على كلمته وجهوده المستمرة في تنظيم مختلف البرامج الهادفة إلى ربط التكنولوجيا الحديثة بالممارسات العملية في مختلف المجالات. والآن فليتفضل الأستاذ أكو مومسيلوفيك مدير الجلسات اليوم لإدارة الجلسة. Please allow me to call Mr. Ako Momsilovic, the co-director and co-founder of Global AI Ethics Institute and a final year PhD from Croatia, to moderate the discussion panel.
Thank you, Dalal, for your kind introduction. Of course, I would like to thank the organizers, International Group of AI and Dr. Jassim Haji, and also the GEC Media Group, and of course, for the patronage of Her Excellency, Dr. Shaika Rana. So it is very important to notice what she already said, that this is one of the first conferences, globally speaking, with this topic. Only to have a few similar ones addressing overall, I would say, educational and AI challenges, and they are organized by UNESCO and some Western countries' universities. So I think that we can really congratulate ourselves to be among the first ones in the world to tackle this, in my opinion, very important topic. As you know, we will have a diverse lineup of speakers that will share their insights in their presentations. And at the end, we will have some time for the questions from the audience that could be written in chat, as some of you already noticed. So in my national AI capital research, it showed that basically education and AI in education is the second most important area where countries should invest their money. So it comes only after healthcare industry. Globally, I would say it is fascinating that we have hundreds of millions of people, literally hundreds of millions, depending on the potential of the development and the deployment of AI education tools. AI products, as we heard, can help both students and teachers and schools in higher education. So it is my really pleasure to announce our first speaker. So I would like to invite Dr. Lorenzo Coutinho Hueso. He's the professor of constitutional law at the University of Valencia, with the topic of artificial intelligence in higher education research. So Dr. Lorenzo, take the stage, please.
Hello, salam alaikum. Good morning from Valencia, Spain. There are authorities, there are organizers, distinguished public, and happy Christmas to all those who have them. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Jassim and Jaco, for inviting me to this important event on artificial intelligence at the University Higher Education. I apologize for my English, which I hope it will be sufficient enough to transmit my knowledge. I am an expert on legal and ethical issues in artificial intelligence. I recently published a guide on legal and data protection issues in research with data and artificial intelligence. However, I have prepared my speech on the uses on artificial intelligence in the academia, tools of artificial intelligence in education, in supporting students, supporting teachers and university management. Then I will talk about the priorities of artificial intelligence policies and strategies in universities. And finally, I will use the time available to describe the European policy on data and artificial intelligence in relation with research, as well as the Gaia project. In any case, as Dr. Jacim's always stressed, I try to give practical examples. Well, I will try to share my screen. I think it's okay if you are watching my screen. Well, from the beginning, one question, one general question we can make. The universities, we are providers of data. We are trainers of algorithms for the big tech. It is close to the question about the chicken or the egg, maybe, but it's not an exclusive question of the universities, but sometimes we can think that if the artificial intelligence is at the service of the higher education or the higher education, simply we are giving data or training algorithms for the big tech. This is an interesting question. It happens also with the smart cities. Then we can ask also as a general question, if we want to replace teachers and professors, of course not, but we have to found the role of the artificial intelligence as the professors. We want especially improve teachers and students with the technology. And we have to I wonder myself, who has to lead and control the artificial intelligence in education? Educators, students, computer scientists, or the big tech? Well, there are not very clear answers, but today, even the artificial intelligence sounds very good for attract investments and develop businesses. Maybe in the education, even at the university, is a sleeping giant. And maybe the breakthroughs will come from outside the system with the big techs and other companies. Linked said in 2017 that we need to strengthen the connection between the artificial intelligence developers and the scientists in learning in education. Maybe there is a big gap between these two scopes. Well, in the introduction has been very well commented the basic uses of artificial intelligence in higher education. It's not bad to remember that it's very good for profiling and forecasting with purposes of marketing, for the students to search the different offers of education, in the processes of admission of the students. In Europe, for example, the future rules will consider high risk artificial intelligence when it will be used for admission for students. More or less, automatic systems, not artificial intelligence, but automatic systems has been used for select the students and even for select professors in Europe. And it could be considered high risk, and it's necessary more guarantees in it. Well, the artificial intelligence is used to mentoring, customization, and coaching for the students, assistance for teachers. It gives tools, especially for evaluation, but also for teaching. And in the administration and management of the universities, it could be very, very important. Especially today, it's very used in to give good information or information with chatbots. Well, some experiences, for example, in mentoring and study programs, it could be mentioned DataRobot in the Florida International University. It's used for the probability that a student will apply for a particular program of this university, the probability of the student will pass the admission, probability to be accepted and to maintain the studies, the probabilities that the student is at risk in their studies, or, for example, the probabilities even for the alumni will donate to the university. In Spain, and concretely in my region, in Spain, in Valencia, is the leader in Spain in that matters. They are developing the project Intelligence and Education for some companies like 1 Million Bot. It's linked with the University of Alicante. And in this, the lines more or less are the same. Students can learn about their own development with artificial intelligence, especially is necessary very good data. The problem today is to get very good data from the students, from the platforms, and make it legally. It is very difficult. The artificial intelligence, the goal is to identify students that need further support, improving the retention of talent, and planned measures and strategies to do it, identification of high competencies, support of the students with functional diversity, coaching, intelligence tutoring systems, and especially the prediction. It's a problem in Spain and probably in other countries in the European Union, the prediction of abandon and early failure of students. Well, in the United States, it could be the Carnegie Learning. They stress the difference between students with systems of big data, artificial intelligence to difference their abilities, detect gaps, redirect the students to one or different programs. It is inside the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. The Carnegie Learning Artificial Intelligence Systems supports and has programs in maths, literacy, supporting the learning of languages. In France, for example, it has been relevant and have got some awards. Mathia is artificial intelligence in maths to support the education in maths, allow teachers to follow the progresses of their students, offer individualized courses, collaborative activities, all supervised by the intelligence system. Also, relation with languages is the system developed by IBM in the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute for teaching Mandarin. For example, PowerPoint have some tools to translation directly with the PowerPoint. It could be mentioned also the Georgia Tech has developed one system with IBM. One of the teaching assistants in some courses was called Jill Watson. Jill Watson has been used more than 4 years, and today they say that today it saves 500 hours and make interactions with the students, mails and other messages. They are answered automatically, and they inform and manage all the communications with the professors and the tutors. Well, as you know, it is very important, the automatic systems, to avoid plagiarism, the copies, the fraud by students, fraud by professors and researchers, and in PhD. We know a lot of cases that are very polemic, like in Spain, for example, our prime minister was accused for plagiarism in his PhD. And today it has to be obligatory to use these kind of systems with the students, research, publications, etc. Of course, we have to control the function of it. It has to be right. And the human supervision of these systems never has to be automatic. After, we have to check it. Well, it has been very polemic, very problematic, the use of facial recognition, especially with the pandemic. Our students, at least in Spain, we call the picaresca, the Spanish picaresca, but probably in the whole world, students at home has copied and has made some frauds. Some universities have used facial recognition with artificial intelligence to detect fraud. Even it has been some strikes of students in some universities in Spain against this system. The Spanish Data Protection Agency has criticized these systems, and it is necessary some more legal security about that. I think they could be used, but it's necessary some guarantees regulated by law. Well, another point is, for example, other tool, very holistic, is Illusion. I'm not a user of these tools, but Illusion has a world services for Latin American, Europe, North American, with a lot of services in the higher education with automatic and maybe artificial intelligence. I mentioned before that chatbots today, they are being very useful with the universities, not only with the universities, of course. We have one European program with 6 universities, one of them a Spanish one, the University of Granada. The program is called Edubots. It's supported by Erasmus program. And normally the chatbots that are used to connect with the students and other clients for pre-registration, enrollment, advice in IT, advice of services of the university, to information for the human resources, campus services, and other facilities. Even in Spain from in United States, I think from 2016 they are using. In Spain from 2018, for example, Lola is very used. There are 7 more universities using chatbots, more or less very efficient, with thousands and thousands of interaction you can use, and they have limited capacities, but today they are very useful, and probably it's a business will be developed strongly in the next years, even for the universities. Another practice we can comment is in the University of Toronto, is the Center of Analytics and Artificial Intelligence Engineering, CARTE, has developed education pathways. It is commented as a good practices. In any case, it seems only a very intelligent system for shared training, courses, etc. for students. Other uses, not in the University of Toronto, are, and probably you know very well, is the profiling to make marketing from the universities to get students. It is very developed and normally supported by big techs. Well, I changed my mind a little bit. I will comment the priorities in the university strategy. I follow, for example, the strategy at the universities of Spain. They stress the points that has to be followed. But first, the governance. It is necessary to build hubs, nets of excellency in research with artificial intelligence. It has to be a good organization of the institutions that are implied and the interaction with the private sector. Normally, it is difficult, especially in Spain, but it's very important to connect university with the private sector in the research programs. It is necessary to identify the areas that has to be the efforts focused, and not to forget that social science are cross-cutting in these matters, because sometimes we forget it. It is very important to stress the knowledge transfer, the return to society, the research that the university makes in artificial intelligence. The role of the universities has to be very good plan in education and training, with this interaction with the social and the private and the public sector. the universities has to build a digital ecosystem, especially about data as the food for the artificial intelligence. After I will talk about it in relation with the European Union, and the topic of ethics of artificial research, of artificial intelligence in research. I have wrote one guide about that. It is necessary to develop ethical committees, legal and technical support from the universities to the researchers. Well, in these last minutes I will talk about the European data strategy. It is very connected with the research in the European Union and the universities also. Then we are today in a tsunami of data, especially with the cloud, the sensorization. And the analysis of the European Union is that the big tech today are the winners. We have to change it. We have to correct imbalances and support medium and small enterprise businesses. And the policies are not about technology, are especially about the data governance, leadership, and legal matters. Property, privacy. In Europe, we have the problems. We are 27 states, but unfortunately, we can share regulation. The goals of the European Union are clear. European data space, and they said that we have to get access by the public and private sector to an almost infinite amount of high quality data in repositories. The goals are to better interacting with government, with businesses, government with government, business to business, better legal security about privacy, about property, intellectual property, etc. Data governance. We have to strengthen the interoperability to create like Gaia X European cloud infrastructures, solving problems of control, portability, rights of the users, and rights respect the use of our data, and especially to take into account the public interest in research. It has to be very important to be more flexible with the regulatory exigencies, for example, in data protection. We have to be more flexible, taking in account the public interest in research or in medicine, for example. Well, it's not possible to explain today, it's not the point, but it's interesting to remember that we have directives, rules from 2003, after 2013, and today about reuse of information, public information. We have a new directive, a new rule, under the idea of the data, the public data has to be open as possible, as closed as necessary. Public companies contracting with the state are obliged to open data. The public funded research have to be open data, and the data, the information has to be open and shared. There are obligations about the open data of metadata, dynamic data for smart cities, for example, and it's called high value data, and the high value data has to be free of charge and principle. Also, we have, it's not passed today, but it will be passed soon, the new Data Governance Act. The strong ideas of this measure is oblige to create neutral points, service providers to share data, facilitate and make registers, forms to give the consent, to regulate the rights. There are systems to claim if the data is not opened in 2 months, could be the decision of the authority, an obligation of pre-processed data for reuse, prepare the data for reuse. In the end, I finish. I'm sorry, Ako, I finish in 1 minute. I would like to comment, to mention, and especially recommend to check for information, the biggest project in Europe about these matters. It's called Gaia-X. Gaia-X is a federated European data infrastructure. It's a hub with the private sector, also with public sector, to develop a system open, interoperable, not only a cloud, a European cloud, it's more an open system for data, for software, and to share with the private sector. It's not possible for reasons of time to comment more, but I strongly recommend this very good initiative. I am a member of Odysseia, and Odysseia is a member of Gaia-X, as more than 2,000 members in the European Union. Well, thank you very much. And sorry for 1 minute more of time. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Lorenzo. I think the timing was quite on the spot. So I wrote down a few notes, maybe for the later part of the conference for the discussion, and hopefully we'll have a chance and time to address at least few of them. So thank you one more time for this very interesting presentation. So without further ado, I would like to announce our second speaker today. So Dr. Claudio Feijo, he's the professor at Technical University of Madrid with the topic of artificial intelligence in higher education within public services. So Claudio, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thanks to you, and of course, thanks to the organizers, Ukram. And I'm going to share my screen. Just a second. Okay, so this should be working. Yeah. All right. So now you should be, come back. You should be seeing my screen. So basically, my purpose of my talk is very, very humbly share our experience on the connection. I think it's an important connection and between AI, artificial intelligence, and higher education institutions. I've been checking some of you, the participants belong to this world of higher education institutions and within public services, with administrations, public bodies, governments, and which is the connection, why this connection is important. And while doing this, I think there are also some maybe interesting lessons that can be applied to any way of educating from higher education institutions into artificial intelligence. Of course, whatever I'm going to tell you, it should be adapted to local circumstances. So it's a little bit wrong to try to just take an example from anywhere, like the one I'm going to tell you, and then directly put it in a different geography, in a different jurisdiction. This is wrong. So I think this is, if you are interested, this is a process like a mutual learning. So maybe there's something I can tell you that can resonate in you, and maybe there's something that you can tell me that can be helpful for us to learn. So hopefully this is valuable for at least some of you. There's a master on this topic that we have already launched in these 4 universities and in Europe, and I'm the person more or less leading this process. So what I'm going to try to do is share our experience. So this is a practical experience. We have already launched this, and we are already going on leading with education and at the same time public services and trying to put AI. So basically what I'm going to do is try to explain you why this is important, what, so how to do it, and who is typical profiles, and then last part, but I think it's important, that education, it is just a little part of a bigger, more ambitious ecosystem, and it's about the ecosystem. So as higher education institutions and working with artificial intelligence, and this is an important message, I think we have a mission to help the transformation. No? Everybody's talking these days about digital transformation. So this is part of this big goal of digital transformation, to make our societies better, no? And to enhance them, to increase the welfare of our societies. So this is at the end what is more important probably in my talk. So quickly starting, why AI for public services, public bodies, public administration from higher education institutions? Why this is important? And you know, there's a lot of hype, no? And I was listening to good friend Lorenzo, and he was telling wonderful possibilities of AI, but it's true, there's also a little bit of a hype. Hype at the same time, high hopes on AI. And why this is so? Because governments, services, public services, administrations are asked to become more efficient every day. So how to become more efficient? It should be using technology, and big data and AI looks like the more promising technologies to get this mission, to become more efficient, to provide better services, better public services to citizenship. So you can see, this is our example from Europe, tons of information and tons of initiatives that go in this direction. However, there's a difficulty in this combination. Why? Because we are asking administrations, public services to comply with two different goals at the same time. On one side, what I mentioned, to be more efficient, but at the same time to be more transparent. So, and we are asking these public services to do it with AI. So, and you can say in this way. So we are asking, we should govern algorithms, but at the same time, there's a danger that we become at the end governed by algorithms. So how to manage this dilemma in the digital world? This is the big question. So we really need to understand what is happening. And again, we have a mission here from higher education institutions to try to put these two a little bit conflicting, contradictory goals together. So there are tons of initiatives in higher education institutions going around AI. And these are just a summary. There's a recent report from my ex-colleagues at the European Commission talking about some examples. But this is the offer, a lot of technicalities, but which is the demand? And the demand is not exactly technology. There's a part of the demand that is understanding, or using technology, implementing technology, but there's another big part of this demand that is more about institutional capacity. It's really being able to work with technology. It's not only being able to program. Okay, this is, of course, this is a mission for higher education institutions, but it goes beyond. It goes into capacity building, institutional reporting, policy, legislative. You can check this report from United Nations, compiling a little bit which is the demand. So putting all of this together, our conclusion, for you to maybe to think a little bit if this is also your case, we need to do something different. Not the traditional type of education on AI and that's all. We need to think in a different way. We need to think beyond just technology and put some other elements together. And this is what we try. So this is the why. And now I move very quickly to the what. Okay. So scope. I already mentioned a little bit of this. We are not talking just about education. We are talking about, in reality, about digital transformation. So we are talking about that the higher education institutions, we have a mission to prepare future digital transformation leaders. So we are talking here about leadership. We are talking about these champions, this person that are able to understand technology and at the same time are able to take this technology into provision of into the delivery of public services. So as you can see in the slide, improve provision, effectiveness, and more important, the value and the capacity, the abilities of the public sector. So this is the scope, and to do it, basically there are like 3 areas of focus. And they have some very important keywords here. First one is about upskilling. it is obvious that technologies go very fast, and there's a role to enhance, to increase the capabilities, the skills of everybody working in the public sector, public servants and around the public service, because there are other things that just purely the public servant. So there's a mission on, there's a focus on upskilling, because if not, they will be a little bit prisoners of technology, prisoners of vendors. And we don't want, from a higher education institution, we don't want that. And we want something that is the welfare of society. And this is in the hands of public servants, people working in the public administration. So one important focus. Second is human-centric. So we really need to put people at the core. Technology, and I'm a technologician, but technology is only a part of the solution, but it's not the center of the solution. It's a part of the solution. The center is the people, it's persons, humans. And this should be made clear from the start. And not just, as you see in many masters, you explain how to do AI or process data with complicated statistics or models. And then there are some additional courses on ethics, no? At the end of the, or somewhere, and no one pays too much attention. No, this should be put from the start at the center in every project, at the start of a project, not randomly along the curricula of some learning. And then there's another keyword, that this is the idea of functional specialist. The idea of a functional specialist is the following. There are two routes when you want to create, let's say, managers of technology, people that is able to understand technology and at the same time implement and use and develop services using this technology. The easy route is taking technologians and provide these technologians with some additional knowledge on management. This is one road. But there's another road, more ambitious and wider, that is taking everybody who knows about the sector, about the vertical, like for instance, public services, and providing these people, giving these people the understanding of technology, enough understanding of technology, so they really can, are able to understand deep enough level of understanding and implement and deliver these services. But they don't need to be technologicians. This is a complicated route because they need to understand technology, and they are not initially, maybe they are a little bit scared, or they think they are unable to get this enough amount of knowledge. But if we succeed, then we have a much wider, much broader, because these people, they are really experts in their sector. So they know about, in this case, public services. All right, so this is an important focus for us. And then objectives of such a project that you can maybe transfer to your own situation, or maybe to some other topics, not necessarily with public services, as potentialities, practical, being able to commission by, so design the right type of project with technology within, implement, manage, and more important, maybe, or the most important for me, to make informed judgment. So they can really take decisions and not just simply what you hear, okay, I don't understand, so I'll go in this direction. I think this is important. So this was number 2, what, and then number 3, how. This is probably too specific, so I'm going to be quick on this, but maybe there are some observations interesting for you. First is this is an important big question. I don't have the final answer. Maybe this is for the discussion. What is the best approach? Should we do short courses, like small courses here and there, or should we do like a longer tracks to acquire expertise? Our particular approach is more in the second, is going for the longer, because we think that really building these functional specialists, building expertise, it takes time. So while short courses can be helpful for improving a little bit, but not enough if you really want to make this transformation. And then you can play with also some carrots, like these are popular words, at least in Europe, about micro-credentials and diplomas, so you can maybe even build in pieces these programs and then put it all together in a longer track. But this is maybe for discussion. And then this is what we do. Basically, so we thought that it was a better approach to put some foundational courses and then working hands-on. So it's project-based education. If you want to, and this is a strong opinion on my side, if you really want to build functional specialists, and remember this is an important focus, then it should be hands-on, because if not, these people who are not experts in technology, they will be always a little bit scared. So you really need to fight and try different possibilities. So we put a lot of focus into hands-on group-based project. The group-based is to also you don't feel isolated, and also maybe there are a group of 4 or 5 people. There's a person who has a little bit of more technical knowledge, and education from student to student is sometimes the best approach in these processes that are very practical. And also maybe interesting for you, and for that reason I keep it here. So some learning outcomes, so you have some metric to know if you're going in the right direction in your education process, and you can again adapt this to your particular circumstances. It can be better informed design, it can be improved digital knowledge literacy, or it can be that you also understand better cybersecurity, privacy. For example, Professor Cotino was talking about this just a moment ago, or management that is connected with these functional specialists, or proper usage of AI, and putting all together, we are talking about governance of AI. This is the difficulty, because we don't want to become governed by AI. We want to govern processes that include AI and big data within. Okay, so this was number 3, and number 4, who? And so this is a little bit of a summary of the type of profiles they are doing our master, because I think there are some interesting messages. So I'll be very quick on this. So, for example, gender is very balanced, because when you look into public services, it's already balanced. So differently from maybe very technological sectors where there's still an imbalance in gender, this is not the case. So this is an interesting and also a potentiality. And then this is a common problem. Even I checked, it was someone already from the Gulf, and no one from Bahrain so far in our process, but you're welcome, of course. Age, this is interesting. This was not for students just finished and they want to do a master degree. No. What we got was with people with a little bit higher age, because they were already working in the sector. No, in fact, we were very successful in attracting profiles that they were working in public services, either directly inside the public sector organization, or a little bit around, but working in any case with public sectors. And then when you look into profiles, yes, most of the profiles are, you look to the right of the slide, there are some people with computer science, but most of them are political science, law, international relations, management. This is the challenge. And this is the challenge for us as higher education institutions. This is a much broader and with a potentially much bigger impact if we go in this direction. More difficult, but more important. So this is, again, food for thought. And just last slide, almost, it is this connection with the ecosystem. No? So my take, or my final message I bring to this forum, and much appreciated, it is, we are not talking just about education. We are talking about how higher education institutions can influence society, can really help transform society. And for that, just this education processes like a master, for instance, is just a little bit part of a much bigger ecosystem. And my humble advice is think in that way. So think systematically, think as in a full system. No? So when you start or design an education process like a master, maybe there are already connections with some other elements in the ecosystem that you can launch using the prestige and the capacity and the connections of the, advisory board, or the professors within, or the companies or institutions you are working. So getting this ecosystem view will help. For instance, just a minor example, but important example, we are trying to connect AI education, public services with startups that work in AI, because for startups it's always difficult to find the right market and to find the right consumers. But it's even more difficult to work with public administrations. So we are using our, let's say, prestige as higher education institutions, and also because most of us, we are also public institutions, so we have a common mindset with public services to create a connection, to bring innovations, new ideas from startups, and plug them with these private services using our educational processes. And in fact, we are launching, for example, the second startup gathering contest. We're bringing AI connected or related startups from all over Europe, and producing like a public participants that are already working in the public sector to try to make this connection, and so they can start working together, and we really can bring innovation at a quicker pace. Just an example, but there are many other possibilities of connecting. But this is basically my talk. I see it's more or less time to finish, and I hopefully have left a number of loose ends so we can keep the discussion in a while. Thanks so much. Back to you.
Thank you, Claudio, a lot. I can recognize many of the things that you mentioned in your presentation. They are definitely applicable to many European countries who are making aware of the questions of AI in the public sector. And I completely agree that there is additionally the question and importance of ecosystem that is created around it. So we also had a few questions in the chat. I know that you have some obligations and that it is possible that you will not be able to stay for the Q&A, but I will make sure that you get our comments and maybe some questions also later to discuss it amongst us. So
I will stay because I've been able to delay it a little bit, so I will stay.
Okay, I'm really then glad to hear that. This is a good news. So then it is my pleasure to announce our third speaker, who is coming from the United States and who was kind enough to wake up in the middle of the night for us. So please, Sam Saarinen, founder of AI and the Data Privacy in Higher Education. So floor is yours.
I am just opening my slides here. And here we go.
Yes, we can hear.
So I am very excited to be speaking after all of these excellent speakers because I get to benefit from what they've already talked about and complement the perspective that they've shared. The perspective that I'm bringing to this discussion is primarily as a researcher and a technologist. I do have an education background. I have some classroom experience even, but primarily I do artificial intelligence research. And what I'd like to talk about today are specifically some technical aspects of some of these problems that we've already talked about in terms of governance, data privacy, and how AI is used, not just what it can do. So to start off with, I'm sure that everyone here is aware, but higher education is very important. It is one of the most direct ways to improve the economy or the development of science in a country, because many students who go to higher education are about to begin their careers in advanced fields. By improving higher education, making it more effective or more scalable, we can have a dramatic impact, not just on the education of those students, but also on our society as a whole. Similarly, AI is an amazing tool for achieving those goals of improving the efficacy and the efficiency of higher education. I want to highlight just a few examples to give a sense of how pervasive this technology is. There's a company called Learnable that uses computer vision to read handwritten exams and practice questions and automatically grade and provide feedback to students. So that's using AI to view and understand images. There's a company called Metametrics, which uses natural language processing to read passages of text and identify the difficulty in reading. It can also be used to determine the writing skill of the author of the passage. And then I'm sure that many of you are familiar with Amazon Alexa, and Alexa is being used in education to provide an auditory interface to education. So all of the speech recognition technology that has gone into Amazon Alexa can be used for education to change the modality of interaction that students have with the technology. I have tried to make an effort in this talk. I am a technical person, but I recognize that there are many of you in the audience who are primarily coming from an administration or management background. And so I've tried to use these Apple symbols to highlight points that are generally applicable and useful in the field of education. And I've used this computer chip icon to indicate more technical points, which are directed more at practitioners or people who will be making technical design decisions. Now, the work that I do is much less visual than those examples. I primarily work in assessment. So the question I'm always trying to answer is, what does a student know? And what I'd like to do right now is offer some perspective on some features of artificial intelligence which underlie all of those different applications, namely the use of student data. And the reason this is so critical is because almost every modern day artificial intelligence system is primarily derived from student data. There is a family of technologies called machine learning, which leverage data in order to make better decisions in the future. And if we understand how data is managed and how it can be used more effectively, we can make smarter decisions about how we develop and how we use artificial intelligence in the context of higher education. Now, one of the biggest issues that comes up when talking about data is an issue of privacy. The EU has the GDPR. In the US, there are a number of laws regulating the use of student data. For K through 12 education, for example, there's a law called FERPA. But even beyond that, there are laws regulating what can and can't be used by companies. Privacy is very important, and to put a fine point on what that means, it means giving the students or the originators of the data control over who has access to that data, what data people have access to, and when they are able to access it. And the reason for this is that we want to prevent abuse of the data. In a perfect world, maybe everyone would use data in the best way possible. But in practice, there are things that can go wrong when people are given access to data and they have bad intent. One thing that can happen is that data can be exploited to threaten or manipulate the originators of the data. So as an example, if students' personal information, like their age, their home address, and other personal details are leaked, that can be used by bad actors to pretend to know the student, for example. They can use that information to try and scam the student, or even to coerce the student into doing things they might not otherwise do. Data can also be used by large companies for aggressive or malicious advertising. A very common failure in privacy is when student emails are leaked, and those are used by large companies without permission to send them email advertising their products. But actually the biggest category I want to talk about is the potential for the data to be misunderstood. If a student releases, say, their test scores, there's a possibility that those test scores will be viewed unfavorably. And if students don't have control of who and when sees what evaluations, it can lead to the student facing negative consequences which aren't fair or representative of their performance. This is actually, I think, one of the biggest issues in education when it comes to data privacy, because everyone is bad at something before they get good. I have put these kind of humorous images up of someone trying to learn how to do a backflip. And in the figure on the left, the person is failing miserably. And the figure on the right, the person has mastered the backflip. What we often forget is that in order to get to the picture on the right, we have to start doing the picture on the left. This comes up in education all the time. As an example, I know many students are afraid to take classes that they think will be difficult because it might impact their GPA. This is actually a data privacy issue. They are afraid that information about their performance in this class, where they don't know how well they will do, will be released without their control or consent. And as a consequence, they avoid taking risks or branching out into new subject areas. This is a critical issue for us to address when we talk about artificial intelligence, because artificial intelligence uses data. So there's this tension between students having control over what data is released and when and how, versus the artificial intelligence systems needing to use that data in order to provide the services that they provide. One solution is just to trust the AI companies, but there's actually a variety of technical solutions that allow AI systems to work while preserving student privacy. And I bring this up, this page is mostly for the more technically minded in the audience who are interested in the design and implementation of these systems. But I think for everyone, there is some utility in knowing that these are problems that can be addressed and tackled from a technological perspective. Simply by asserting that privacy is a priority, we can start to design solutions that meet those needs. So the technique that I've put up here is something called federated learning. The idea is that instead of having a central location where all of the machine learning happens in order to generate this, this AI system, you can actually have learning distributed over all of the different devices or locations where the data is collected. So this could be individual schools or institutions. It could even be on the devices of individual students. By distributing the learning and then sharing the changes to the model as opposed to the original data, we're able to update this global model that's shared among all of the systems or all of the devices without the personal data ever leaving the students' say phones or computers. And so by design, federated learning allows for data privacy while also enabling machine learning at a large scale. Now, I want to continue the discussion of privacy by talking about an issue called fairness. And fairness is really about making sure that bad actors don't misuse data which should be irrelevant. So in contrast to student data privacy in general, which might include things like test scores and enrollment decisions, which are very relevant to their education, there are features of students which should not matter, but in practice often do. A common one is gender. Different occupations and different courses of study often attract people of different genders for whatever reason. And as a consequence, the data that we receive about them is biased, and the people involved in that system often make decisions that may be using that information unwisely. It may be impacting decisions in a way that is harmful to the student and the society that the student lives in. Now, one solution you might think of is, well, we can just ignore that data. We can throw out, say, gender or geographic background and choose not to use it. This actually doesn't solve the problem of creating a fair system because of something called Simpson's paradox. If you have, say, two different categories, and these two different categories are separate, there's no way of transitioning between them, differences between the categories can produce an overall trend, which is different from the trend if you look within each of those categories. So you can imagine different values for the x-axis and the y-axis here, but I might imagine that the y-axis is ability to do good scientific writing, or maybe number of publications in, say, computer science. And the x-axis might be the number of language courses taken or the number of writing courses. Now, between two different groups, there may be a preference in one of the groups to take more language courses and also not to study, say, computer science. But within each of the groups, there's a benefit to taking additional language courses in order to improve writing ability and the ability to produce publications. So this is kind of one example of how this can show up, but anytime that there are categories and different axes of data, we can arrive at the situation where simply ignoring the categories actually leads to the wrong recommendations. So one of the things that's challenging about fairness is that there are lots of different ways of defining it, and many of them are mutually exclusive. So I just want to name a few of these here, because if you are choosing a system to use or designing a system, you want to be aware of how it will impact people from these different categories or different protected groups. So one goal for fairness is that the system doesn't overestimate or underestimate the performance of a particular group. So this is something that I'm calling accuracy fairness. If I wanted to predict student test scores, for example, I wouldn't want to be systematically underestimating the scores of people from a particular group. A second category of fairness is something I'll call precision fairness, which is that the noise or the range in the predictions should be about equal for the different groups. One of the things that can happen in a machine learning system where there is, say, a minority group is that there's less data for that group, and therefore the predictions have less certainty. There's more range in the outputs. What that can mean is that the system is only functional for people who belong to the majority group, because there's the smaller group that isn't prioritized in the training procedure. They can end up with a system that just doesn't work for them because of the lack of precision. A third category of fairness is called opportunity fairness. This is particularly important when it comes to things like admissions or scholarship decisions. And the goal of opportunity fairness is that all students who can succeed are identified. This is kind of a one-sided fairness criterion where we don't want to miss anyone who could succeed given the opportunity, regardless of what category they belong to. The final version of fairness that I'll mention right now is called parity fairness, which says that the outcomes should be independent of the category that a student belongs to. So if I have students from two different groups, I shouldn't be able to tell which group they come from based on the prediction or the output of the system. So fairness is a complicated issue. This is definitely not going to be a comprehensive talk on fairness, but what I do want you to be aware of is that it is an issue and that there are technologies for addressing it. So for each of these different fairness criteria, there are a variety of techniques and technologies that can allow us to improve the fairness of our systems. One way that we can address accuracy fairness is by making sure that our data is unbiased and objective. If our data is generated by humans, then it frequently encodes the biases and the flaws of those human decision makers. So one of the problems is if we take, say, for example, grades assigned by teachers, and then we want to predict student success, we may just be reproducing the misunderstandings or the biases of those teachers. In education, it can be difficult to find objective sources of ground truth, but if we're able to do that, it greatly improves the fairness of our systems. Another idea is something I'll call maximum training. Rather than focusing on the accuracy of the total system, we can divide the students into lots of different groups and try to optimize the performance or the accuracy for the least accurate group. So this guarantees that the precision or the performance is roughly equal across all of the student population. Another technique is called adversarial training. The idea here is to train a second model or a second agent that is able to, or attempting to, identify the group that a student comes from based on the outputs of the system. This is particularly related to the ideas of parity fairness or opportunity fairness. We don't want to be able to detect which group a student came from on the basis of which decision was given to them or which prediction was made of them. Fourth technique I want to mention is something called a factored model. So one method that we can use is to explicitly account for how membership in a group affects the prediction. And then we can factor out or remove that factor from the prediction when we actually make decisions. Now, Fairness also brings up an issue, which is that if all of the students that we've seen at training time, say in the data set that we've collected so far, are of one type, and then we get a new student of a different type, we may not know what to do with them. And in traditional AI, this would mean that we just make a bad decision. And this is really suboptimal because as we change who has access to higher education, we are inevitably going to run up against this issue. As students from poorer backgrounds or more challenging family situations, or who have, say, come from a situation of being political refugees, as more of them get access to higher education, their features are going to be different relative to some of the students that have traditionally attended these institutions of higher education. In order to solve this problem, we should attempt to model our uncertainty as we make predictions about the outcomes for different students. And this uncertainty can be categorized into two main categories. One is called Alliatory Uncertainty. This is after the Latin for a dice player, called an alliator. And this represents fundamental uncertainty or risk, just because of the nature of the process. So as an example, any student might have a death in the family, or might have, say, a medical accident happen, and there's no way that we can predict that ahead of time. So there's always going to be some uncertainty in, say, the student outcome for a course. On the other hand, there's a different kind of uncertainty called epistemic uncertainty, which comes from the Greek episteme, meaning knowledge. And epistemic uncertainty stems from our lack of knowledge of similar situations. There are machine learning techniques that can allow us to address these two different kinds of uncertainty. And again, for the technologists, I think these techniques are actually very interesting as statistical models for identifying and distinguishing these two types of uncertainty. But for anyone who is not going to be implementing these systems on their own, I think it's very important that you're aware that this is an issue that should be addressed. And there are techniques that allow us to model the uncertainty that we have if we get a student who comes from a new group, or that is dissimilar from students we've seen before. Again, I want to connect the dots here that uncertainty is really an extension of the idea of fairness. We want to be able to identify cases where our decisions may be inaccurate or unfair. And fairness is really an extension of the idea of privacy. We want to ensure that our data is being used appropriately and that students have control over when and how their data is used. Just to give an illustration of these two different kinds of uncertainty, you can see on the left that as we increase the amount of training data, epistemic uncertainty goes down. As the system gets more experience and more knowledge, there are fewer situations where it doesn't recognize it or it hasn't seen a similar example. On the other hand, alliatory risk stays the same, even as we increase the amount of data. The goal then is that for any given prediction, we can also give a confidence region. So we can predict not only what the average or what the typical outcome is, but we can give a sense of what range of outcomes are possible given the model. Now, my company primarily provides consulting and APIs for education in assessment and some of these other areas. If you are interested in hearing more about any of these technologies or asking technical questions, please reach out to me on LinkedIn. The main takeaway I want everyone from this talk to walk away with is that we need to focus not just on the solutions that AI can bring, but on the problems that may affect its implementation and its use. It's very important not just to see a flashy piece of technology that, say, can process student videos or do facial recognition, but also to recognize how that is being used and the factors that are important in how effective it is in the context of higher education. Thanks.
So, Sam, thanks a lot for a very interesting presentation. I have the feeling that I need to additionally brush up my statistical methods, the factor analysis and the regression analysis, and to see how can I use them potentially in some projects. Very interesting presentation, and we had some questions even directed directly to you. But I want to invite all of our lecturers. So Lorenzo and Claudio, if he is still here, and I think that he is. Great. Claudio, and then to discuss a few questions. I had a few, but also we had even few interesting comments and questions in chat. So just to notice that I'm glad that there are some students from medical universities attending this conference, and I'm also really happy to see that the airport of Bahrain is also using already now the artificial intelligence in some of their processes. So maybe to discuss one question that is general and that is open for all. So which AI-powered innovations do you personally expect in AI education field? So we definitely mentioned a few. So in what area do you believe most of the innovations are going to go in the next, let's say, 3 to 5 years?
So maybe I can start because I posted something that goes along these lines. So for me, the challenges are basically three to help in the process of education. We're talking here about the pace, the rhythm, when you learn. So this is one challenge. So not everybody has the same. The second is the path, because we learn in different ways. So AI can help you in having a personalized path when you learn. And the number three is which is the real objective of education for you. What is really what you want to learn and why? I think while the first two are easier and there are upcoming solutions, and even during the talk, some of them have been already mentioned. I think the real challenge also to improve our societies is number three. And this is what I expect solutions. And also the solutions can be more respectful with privacy, and also can really be help individuals and help us in this learning process. So this is my take.
Yeah, great. Thanks for the answer. So Lorenzo, Sam, do you have something to add on this very interesting question? What are your predictions? Lorenzo, you need to unmute yourself. It seems that
yes, I'm sorry. Well, I think as it is happening in other areas, sometimes we have in the idea of artificial intelligence to do very, very developed things and to substitute the teachers to correct and evaluate our students. And probably we have to be step by step. And today it is possible to use, the first challenge is to get good big data of students, but legally. And at least in Europe, it's very, very difficult and has to be very difficult to get the data to profiling for the students and profiling the professors. Then, as it is possible to get it legally with very good data, it would be possible to have better services, to have more 360 services to the students and to the teachers, and to improve the coaching of the students and the alerts for if the students are not in the good way, these kind of things. I think the basis of all our future is how to get good big data legally, very difficult in Europe, not impossible. And then it will be easier to get better services. I'm shocked, very, very interesting, the speech of Sam and his company, because he knows the things that are possible. It's possible to use the algorithms to learn, but without very good data, it would be very difficult. And I finished. My first question, it was, the role is that the big tech will learn and will take advantage of our data as professors, as students, as researchers, or we have to have a more, at the universities, in the universities, the role to leadership this process. Well, thank you. I'm sorry for this different
thank you.
questions.
Thank you, Lorenzo. I could see that others are also agreeing with many of the things that you said. Sam, you're ready to also to contribute?
Yeah, I'd love to just maybe add on to those two excellent answers that I think a very exciting possibility is that of collaboration between educators and artificial intelligence. I think that a lot of what we see in the news is about automation or replacing existing educational processes. But what I think is most exciting and probably going to have the largest impact is actually enabling better decision-making by using AI to analyze data and then present those results to educators, whether they be instructors or administrators or other policymakers even. And this is part of why I work in assessment, because I think the collection of data and the use of that data to inform human decision-making is one of the largest areas of potential impact for artificial intelligence in the next 5 years.
Great, I definitely agree. So the importance of data obviously cannot be stressed enough. I would just maybe like to add one of the researchers that I found and that I was not expecting. So basically, I would predict that the best innovations in the future are going to be connected with the personalized mentoring and personalized coaching and tutoring, because the impact that can be done on the individual level is something that I think that we are as a society we are not aware of. So basically, I was reading the researchers who are showing that you can take somebody that has average results. So let's say he's on the 50% of the potentially max result, and with individual tutoring you can bring him to 98 or 99%. So 3 standard deviations okay, let's say 1.5 standard deviation improvement just because of the individual tutoring. So this is something that was obviously completely impossible to be done before because of the manpower. We didn't have enough teachers. No country had enough of them, but now the AI tools could solve that problem. And I think that the overall impact of that in the future could be really enormous. So, okay, maybe to get to another question from the audience, it's a comment and a question. So it started with the SAM lecture. So the comment is this: AI can help with personalized pace in learning, with personalized path when learning, and the number 3 is personalized objectives. And there are upcoming solutions for the first 2, but there are real challenges in number 3. So what do you think? Could we address the personalized objectives also with the artificial intelligence and help maybe students in some way to better understand themselves and their decision process in the higher education? So it's a quite complex question, I would say. So if you have any ideas, yeah, Claudio?
Yeah, very, very simply, because I was guilty for this, launching this discussion. So in fact, you mentioned a very good example, personal mentoring. This is, for me, looks like good because it's helping the individual. And if we just use data for efficiency, okay, maybe the school, the university, the college is better, maybe more efficient. Good, but it's a minor goal compared to really provide opportunities to individuals, to students, much higher, much more important to my view. And this is what I like to see development, and I think where the real challenge is. So personal mentoring helped by AI, the example you mentioned, is a fantastic example.
Okay, Lorenzo, you want us to add something?
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm not remember exactly the question, because I was looking for in the chat the question. Please, could you repeat it? If possible, it's possible for you to repeat the question, because I was looking on the chat. But
okay, yeah, of course there is interference. Let Jim give me just a second to find it. So it was comment actually from Claudio, but the number 3 is the personalized objectives that are kind of hard to influence with AI. So this is like the hardest part that Claudio mentioned, that we can move to, and we can influence with the AI tools. But yeah, if we can go to the next question if there's nothing to be added there. So there is one again that was directed to Sam, so maybe you can answer it first, but I would like to hear Sam, sorry.
Well, I wanted to add on
please,
this last question. It's a very complicated question, right? Because student objectives are personal, and so there has to be this cooperation between what the student wants versus the information that an AI system can be providing. But 2 factors that I think AI can supplement in terms of the students' decision-making. One is a prediction of their success. So given a student's background, it's possible to provide an estimate of how likely it is that a student will, say, graduate or be hired in a particular field. So if a student, say, doesn't have sufficient math courses, they might not be recommended to become a professional mathematician. The second thing that AI can provide, I think, is an estimate of the social and financial implications of different career decisions and a sense of how competitive the hiring is in different fields. So I think the role of AI in solving this problem of personalizing objectives for students is to give them more context and information in making those decisions and understanding how they can impact them. And then once they've made that objective or picked that objective, then AI can facilitate the selection of a curriculum or a learning path and provide personalized instruction to help them get there.
Okay, great, thanks. I agree with what you said, but you can continue maybe first one with the next question, since it was directed also to you, but I think it's a general one. So how AI can address those issues that all of you mentioned in your presentations, but before they become threats, so who is responsible for it, and when do we need to do it? Is it already now too late? So this is again one very interesting question that can be addressed from many different standpoints. So Sam, what is your opinion?
Yeah, so I'll first off say I am a bit of an optimist. So I think in terms of the question of whether it's too late, I would say it's almost never too late. Once we recognize a problem, we're able to bring solutions to scale very quickly. And this is one of the amazing things about AI, is that improvements are able to be scaled very rapidly. In terms of identifying things that could be issues before they become issues, I think this is partly where human and AI collaboration is critical. An AI system is not able to recognize things that it hasn't seen before. What it can do, though, by modeling uncertainty, is to identify situations that it isn't aware of or maybe hasn't encountered before. This is a little bit different from identifying systemic issues. It could be that by prioritizing a particular objective, say student graduation rate, you actually are making decisions that hurt a different objective, which might be broadening participation in higher education. This is really a place where humans have to come in and decide which of those two objectives are the most important. And there's always going to be, I think, a challenge for AI systems to figure out when what we've asked it to do is different from what we actually wanted.
Okay, great. It seems that Claudio wants to add something.
So simply to say that I fully agree with Dr. Sarina, with Sam. I will only add that for me the solution is very simple. It's human-centric, so not technology-centric. This is wrong. So if we only use technology for efficiency, this is not the way. So it's more, okay, education is the important process for learning, and how we can use technology to help in this process with our educational objectives, not because of technology, not because of efficiency. But I fully agree.
Great. Lorenzo, it seems, agrees also. So I think that we are maybe even agreeing a little bit too much. We need to maybe kind of address something that we don't agree with. So, but okay, regarding the timeline and the time that we planned, I will just maybe ask one brief questions for all three of you. Because in the beginning, Lorenzo mentioned that quote that AI is a sleeping giant, but in the recent years, it is kind of waking up. And definitely, as Claudio mentioned, we expect the great promise of artificial intelligence. So from my side, maybe how do you see and how important would be influence and decisions that government and countries are doing in the AI development and the regulations? Because this is something that we differ a little bit between the countries, but also something that can be inspiring for other countries, either to see a good practice or either to see our bad practices. So maybe something then for the Bahrain officials and leadership, some kind of conclusion and some kind of recommendation. So how do you see your governments in your countries influencing and dealing with AI development and implementation, especially in the higher education? Yeah,
well, thank you. It could be very long, the answer, but focusing my answer in the higher education, For example, there are temptations for using artificial intelligence to select the students who will study law, science, other grades. Even in France, especially in the United Kingdom, there were problems using automatic systems for select students during the pandemic. It will be regulated. The admission of students, I have commented, is high risk artificial intelligence. It could be very important. In other systems like China, they are using in education, and there is one interesting question in the chat, to facial recognition, to evaluate continuously the students. This is not the way we like in Europe, but it could be a way in other parts, and it could be understood that the continuous monitoring of students could improve the efficiency of the model, and even it could be better for the students. But I think in Europe, we don't share this point of view. The system of the social credit system is linked with the education, and this is not the way we have to choose. During the pandemic, I know it's very good in Spain, the big tech platforms have been very useful for the education, the tele-education, but a huge amount of data of professors and students has escaped of our control. There were not legal, clear contracts to fulfill the GDPR. It is very, very important because it is very easy to make very, very deep profiles of students and teachers, and it could be regulated. It could be shown bad because it sounds always data protection like a barrier to the artificial intelligence, but it could be very important because I asked the sleeping giant. It depends because it could be very, very quick in hands of the big tech, but maybe it's not the way we would like to get.
Exactly.
I'm sorry, thank you.
Yeah, no, exactly. I completely agree. And I think that we have the very similar perspective from the Europe, because the differences are not too big between the countries. And maybe any comment from Sam on the topic?
Yeah, I do think that coming from the US, maybe I have a little bit of a different perspective because many of these systems emerged very quickly. And there's been, I think, a little bit of a scramble to find good legislation and regulation to kind of work with these systems and make sure that the ultimate result is beneficial. I think there are a few things that government can do that are very important. And I definitely defer to the expertise of Claudio and Lorenzo on the issues of what government can do and should do. But I think one thing is that governments can invest in the technology. When an institution, like in the US, we have the National Science Foundation, which is a large funding agency for scientific research. When they set a set of research priorities, they are able to influence the direction of research in the entire field. Mm-hmm. And I think by choosing to invest in AI for education and to set funding decisions around consideration of critical issues like privacy, student safety, issues of fairness, they're able to direct the flow of even industry and large companies, because many of the researchers who get hired by those companies will have been influenced by the research that was being done at the universities where they first studied. The second thing that I think that governments can do is to work to form partnerships. So rather than chasing down existing big companies and trying to regulate them after the fact, I think finding ways to bring on representatives from industry and from academia as advisors and consultants in the formation of new legislation is really critical to ensure that the legislation is practical and beneficial.
Thanks, Sam. I think that it is now time to say that it was really a pleasure to listen all of your presentations. I mentioned in the beginning one interesting fact that the education area is the second in which experts globally around the world think that we should invest. But to connect it and to respond to something that you said, when I ask those people similar questions, where do you think that investments will go, like in practice? Unfortunately, the education area was almost at the end. So it was the last one. So there is that discrepancy between where we think that the money should go and what tools and projects should we develop because it has a greater good, and then the reality of, let's say, short scope of return of investment way of thinking and many private companies that are investing in artificial intelligence. So I would just like for everybody to keep that in mind, that it is up to us kind of to push, to ask for it and to think strategically. So to conclude, I would like to thank also all the participants and give a microphone back to our MC Dalal to bring this event to the closure. So Dalal, if you would be so kind to continue.
I would like to thank Mr. Ako, Dr. Lorenzo, and Dr. Claudio, and also Dr. Sam for their participation and enlightening us with their speeches. نشكر الأستاذ أكو وجميع المشاركين في هذه الجلسة، والآن فليتفضل الدكتور جاسم حاجي لإلقاء كلمته الختامية.
شكرا أخ دلال. Thank you, Ako, Dr. Lorenzo, Dr. Claudio, Dr. Sam, for making time to join us. And one thing I must say, that they all had very busy schedules, in addition to being a day pre to Christmas Eve, and they all rather to be with their families, loved ones, but they had made time to be with us. I also like to thank Sam for making it with the time difference between US and here. Dr. Lorenzo, I know you have a lot of activities, making time. Dr. Claudio, I know you are chairing a meeting today as well, but you extended your stay here. So Ako, you've been with me for the past few weeks arranging it. Thank you for moderating it. Just before to closing, I would like to also mention an achievement by the International Group of Artificial Intelligence, which has been greatly supported here. The unknown soldier, Mr. Tushar Sahu, the head of GEC, which has been the instrumental behind all this, and another soldier, Vijay. Vijay has been working behind the scenes, making all this very smooth and helping us to do so. In IGAI, International Group of Artificial Intelligence, in the space of last 2.5 months, we've been able to conduct 3 important international conferences. There was a virtual conference of Bahrain's first international conference in the Middle East in AI and sports, which was done under the patronage of His Highness Sheikh Khalid bin Hamad Al Khalifa, the first deputy chairman of the Supreme Council for Youth and Sports, president of the General Sports Authority, and president of Bahrain Olympic Committee was kind to chair that conference. We had a physical conference only last month in Dubai Expo on AI in judiciary and legislation with the Gulf Cooperation Council, the GCC, and under the patronage of His Excellency, the General Secretary of GCC, and the presence of all ministers of justice in the GCC. That was another success. And today was Her Excellency Dr. Sheikh Rana bint Al Khalifa also honored us to patronage this. So all in all, the momentum is kept. We have many more to do, and it's all to bring the knowledge of artificial intelligence in the Middle East and GCC, but more importantly, we base it here in Bahrain to explore the opportunities. And I'm obliged to to university presidents, academies, administrators, students who've attended that with us today, and also the members of the press. One final word of thanks, and I would like if he could also say a couple of words. Again, that the support came from the His Excellency Sheikh Abdullah bin Khalid Al Khalifa, Chief of Communications in the Higher Education Council. So, Sheikh, if you would like to say a couple of words, where we ending it here, and I thank everybody again.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jassim Haji, and thank you to all the organizers, particularly His Highness Sheikh Nasser's Vocational Center for Training, and to all the panelists and the moderator, and of course the International Group of Artificial Intelligence. My boss, Her Excellency, Dr. Sheikh Rana, who has patronized this event. Artificial intelligence in higher education, as our panelists have already alluded to, is very essential, and we personally at the HEC look forward to integrating more and more of what AI has to offer with regards to higher education. When it comes to teaching and supporting our students at all our HEIs. So thank you again for giving us this opportunity and for sharing your thoughts in this regards to all the panelists involved and to all the participants for their questions and interjections and inputs. Thank you all very much.
كل الشكر للشيخ عبد الله بن خالد آل خليفة والدكتور جاسم حاجي. ممتنون لسعادة الدكتورة الشيخة رنا بنت عيسى بن دعيج آل خليفة، الأمين العام لمجلس التعليم العالي، نائب رئيس مجلس أمناء مجلس التعليم العالي، لتشريف ورعاية سعادتكم هذا المؤتمر. ونشكر جميع الحضور والمتحدثين على دعمهم ومشاركتهم الفاعلة. على أمل اللقاء بكم في ندوات أخرى بإذن الله، مع تمنياتنا للجميع بدوام الصحة والعافية، ودمتم في رعاية الله، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله.